I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z Podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Retention as a Service agency, Electric. Before we jump into things today, I want to introduce our sponsor, Gorgias, #1 Shopify customer support platform, helping brands like BrüMate and 11,000 more turn their customer support into a profit center. So elevate your customer experience, increase retention, and boost efficiency with Gorgias' omni-channel help desk. You can book a demo on Gorgias.com and mention the D2Z podcast to get your second and third months for free. So don't miss out and stop leaving sales in your unresponded tickets. Now, without further ado, for the 61st episode of the D2C podcast, I'm joined by my brother, Parker Amoroso, who is a recent graduate of Stanford and who we've been working very closely together on an up-and-coming new project. Parker, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, my name's Parker. As he mentioned, I'm Brandon's brother. We've been working on a new project that's pretty exciting in the HR SaaS space. And so we're excited to get rolling here soon. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
So what were some of the main, I guess, before we dive into things, why don't you just give everybody a quick high-level overview of what it is and sort of what the problem is that you're trying to address here?
Yeah, so what we're trying to address is the issue of hiring, essentially, and why it sucks and why it's so bad. And anyone who's ever hired someone has gone through the pains of trying to source candidates and then sort and filter through them and finding people who are actually qualified for the job. And as part of that, there's a lot of institutional and long-time tools that have been sort of created that exist in the HR industry that have really been the biggest players for decades now. And so, the process by which people are hired has become pretty stagnant in many ways. And there's a lot of exciting opportunities for innovation that we've sort of picked out as opportunities for us to explore with our new product. And so that's sort of the angle we've been taking over the last year as we've dove into this market and tried to figure out what it is we can provide and what sort of value add we can have.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how just a terrible experience it is on both ends. Like, I can't really think of another example where there's both of the parties on the side of the transaction, let's call it a transaction for the sake, are being so underserved. Like, as an employer, trying to find employees is a nightmare. Like, trying to find people to work at Electric was extremely challenging, cost a lot of money, and something that we never really figured out. And through all the talks that we've had, nobody has really figured it out. Referrals is always the way to go, but referrals runs out at a certain point. And then from there, it's so much more of a quantity versus quality industry. And we had to set up all these really manual processes at Electric so that we could sift through the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of applicants we were getting for jobs to actually find maybe the 3 to 5 that were relevant. What is your take on the whole sort of quantity versus quality approach to things? Because from my perspective, it kind of seems like the job boards are actually incentivized to have quantity over quality because they're charging based off of advertising and pushing people into the ATS systems.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of incentive to have quantity over quality, just from the standpoint that if you're paying for a service like a job board and posting jobs on that board, you're expecting candidates. And I think that's sort of the natural incentive that's been provided to the large companies and what they're returning in exchange. And there's also such a limited number of players that are really large and sort of dominate the upper echelon of the industry that there's not a lot of incentive for further innovation beyond sort of the standard American PDF resume that's, quick one-liners about what you've done in the past. So it's difficult for them to actually provide you with the candidates that are qualified. So it makes more sense to just provide a lot of quantity in the hopes that eventually within that large pool, there will be, those 3 or 5 who actually are qualified for the job or who will make sense in the role.
I think the craziest thing to me is that there's no feedback loop. Like, the job boards don't hear back from the companies on whether or not people were hired or whether it was successful or not. And it's like, how can you fine tune the algorithm that's actually providing the recommendations if you're not even sure whether or not the recommendations you're providing end up being successful or not? It seems to be relatively broken.
Yeah, I think the segmentation of the two platforms is sort of the biggest issue in the industry, and the idea that the ATS is somehow separate from the job board, and that the passing of all these applicants and their data throughout all these different tools is a effective means is obviously not working for the average employer. And obviously the situation depends on where your company is at and sort of what is the desirability of your company, which changes how you kind of approach hiring and recruiting. But it's a real mess for everyone involved, regardless of how you have to approach recruiting as a company.
Yeah, I love our tagline, hiring shouldn't suck, because that is the current state of affairs, is that it's just a brutal process to manage. Now, taking a little bit of a step back, what were some of the things that prompted you to A, want to start this particular company, and B, go this route right out of college versus going and getting, and I will put in air quotes, a real job?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of what made me want to go this route is I obviously spent a lot of time applying for internships during my freshman and sophomore years before I started working on this. And as part of that, it becomes pretty clear early on that there's a lot of inefficiencies in the system. I know a lot of the companies I was applying to were large enterprise companies, huge corporations, whether it was investment banks or big companies like PayPal with finance departments and whatnot. And a lot of those companies were on Workday, for example, where you would just be filling out the same profile information over and over again. So just submitting one application to one company would be, a 30 to 35 minute time suck that you wouldn't get back. And, odds are the vast majority you're not going to hear back from. So you'd just be hours.
It won't even reply to you.
Right. Yeah. It'd be just hours of repeating the same thing over and over again. So that you could, it's almost like an email marketing campaign. Like, what's your hit rate going to be afterwards? It certainly incentivizes a quantity over quality approach from the job seeker as well, just to kind of spray and pray, especially early stages of your career. So that was the first kind of issue I identified, and just exploring from there. Obviously, I worked for Electric for a while and with companies there, and was in relative proximity to some of their hiring practices, and got to talk with a lot of early stage companies and their founders and people working at them, and understand what their issues were on the employer side of the hiring process. So from there, it was just a matter of kind of piecing it together and thinking about ways that this system could be improved, and how we might go about doing that. And then in terms of why I decided to do this instead of go find a quote real job, is because I'm not very good at working for people. That's just the reality of the situation, is that I kind of like to be involved in a lot of things at once. And I think, most jobs you just, you end up in a specific role where you're given essentially a function within this larger system and expected to just perform that same function over and over again. So like, if you get, take investment banking, you end up as an analyst at an investment bank. You're just going to be, creating the same spreadsheets over and over again on Excel. And, maybe there'll be a little nuance and difference between the spreadsheets between different companies, but it's going to be essentially the same thing day in, day out. And I don't find that to be very exciting or innovative, or a way you can actually impact or contribute to the business or to the world or anything like that. So this seemed to be a much more exciting route, maybe a little bit more risky, but I think it'll be a lot more fulfilling in the long run.
I think now is the time to take the risk without any real financial like commitments, no family, like there's not people depending on you. I'm not envious of the, like, I have friends who are 40, 45, 50, they've got a family, they've got all these other responsibilities that they have to manage and juggle, all while also building a business. I am not envious of their position. Because I think about, like, with electric, the amount of time I would spend on the weekends or just like things that I would pass up in order to work. You can't do that if you have like a family or if you have like real commitments and responsibilities. So I think now is the best time, at least from my experience, to just go ahead and take the leap.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense now, I'd say, from a time perspective. I can work Saturdays and Sundays without any issue. I don't have anyone saying that I got to spend more time with them, so it works out well.
Don't get a girlfriend.
Yeah,
they'll take up your Saturdays, your Sundays, and all your evening nights.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, maybe you should take that note down.
I'm here to give advice, not receive it.
Is that what this podcast is?
Yeah, so we're going to change this podcast into a relationship advice.
Well, I'll go lay down on the couch and you can give me some good advice as I try and contemplate my life.
So what are some of the challenges that you're navigating as a first-time entrepreneur, and some of the things that you've uncovered, or I mean, there's even things that I've uncovered as a part of this process with Scalis that I had no idea, and then you'll learn. It's a learning lesson. But what are some of the things that you have already run into in this short time?
Yeah, team building is probably the most difficult thing. Finding the right people to fill the right roles. I think we've had a lot of luck in that process. I think we've found a lot of good people, whether it's the individual building out our algorithm in the early stages of that, or the Elasticsearch component. I think it was not guaranteed that we would find the right people, and I think we had a lot of luck there. So it's not easy to sort of find a starting team. The other thing that's probably pretty difficult is just conservation of resources, making sure you're not spending too much money. It's really easy to start racking up fees when you're developing a product. Just because you think the navigation bar should look this way or like a certain way, even if you already did it one way, you probably should just leave it alone. It's probably not worth the extra, $800 to have your navigation bar completely changed. It's still going to perform the same function, whether it looks one way or the other. So it's hard not to get kind of sucked into that. And then scope creep is a real thing. I remember when I was at USC, we took a project management class with a professor, and he spent the first 3 weeks talking about scope creep and project management. And I was like, this can't be that. It doesn't seem that interesting. It was a pretty boring class, honestly. But sure enough, I started on this project, and there's been plenty of scope creep. So he was not lying. That is a real thing.
What would you define as scope creep? What's like an actual example of something that's happened recently to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we set out to build this product, we had one specific task in mind, particularly focused around the algorithm and the matching of candidates, and we wanted to tie the ATS to that. But what is an ATS and what tools should it include is kind of an ever expanding concept that we started with an X number of narrowed down tools, and the next day we had more tools, and 3 months later all of a sudden we were like, well, this tool probably should be added. So we've finally settled on what tools we're going to have. So there has not been any scope creep in a few months, but we're definitely not at the launch date we thought we were going to be at.
Yeah, I mean, that was always pretty, what's the word?
We had a pretty optimistic launch.
There we go.
Very ambitious.
There we go. Yeah. But I think the other thing that is, before I jump to that, I do like how the person that we had a call with earlier this morning said that you have a product that craves money, craves product development, which is true. I mean, there's so many things, there's so much opportunity. And I think that's why there's just so many pain points in the market. There's so many things that have been expressed to us through the consumer interviews that we've been doing. And I think the main challenge is just prioritizing what to do first.
Yeah, I think
and we're seeing this on the drinks app side as well. I mean, you have like a ton of feedback coming from merchants. Like there's just everybody loves to give feedback, but then it's how do you actually distill that down into a roadmap that makes sense and is going to allow you to achieve your long-term goals.
And then everyone we talk to as well is like usually has like a question like, oh, well, is it going to do this? And like, wouldn't it be cool if it did this? Like nothing else does this. And like, yeah, it would be pretty sweet if it did whatever it was that they were talking about. But, you know, after 5-6 calls, you know, that we got like 7 different initiatives that all are like only tangentially related and would take it, you know, maybe a full year of development to actually build out, and who knows how much cash would be burned in the process. So it's very easy to start getting excited.
I think we are in a little bit of a unique position in that we're entering into a market that is already defined. And so there's certain things that we don't necessarily have to do in the building of the initial sort of MVP per se. I mean, our product is not an MVP. It is an actual product. Yeah. It is a full baked applicant tracking system because they exist. Yeah. There's already a need for it. We've already tested it into the customers. So we didn't really have to spin up this like really low cost thing that could test our concept or idea into market because it's already there.
And we can't really test what we want to do anyways with an MVP. I mean, we need the actual system built out for it to be useful.
No, unfortunately, we have the ability to wait an extra 2 to 3 months to launch with things that we know are crucial to what we want to do versus trying to rush a product to market that maybe isn't going to be really up to par yet. I think you as a business have one opportunity to make a good impression with a company or person. And if you mess that up, it is very difficult to ever regain that trust. There's been multiple instances of names that I will not mention of software companies in the Shopify ecosystem that have launched products before they were ready. And now they're really great 1.5 or 2 years later. But all the clients that they launched that initial product with won't even talk to me about using it. They're like, nope, already tried that. Awful experience. I don't even want to entertain it for at least the next 3 to 5 years. So I think there's a lot to be said for going to market quickly and then being able to iterate. But at the same time, if you roll shit out there, you're going to drag your name through the mud, and then you're not going to be able to recover from that very well.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true, I think. And we've worked very hard to make sure that that's not what will happen. I mean, I think what we launch with will be a very high quality product that will work and will serve all the needs we've intended it to serve.
Well, I can't stress enough how important it is to tap into your network for anybody who is listening and has any entrepreneurial ideas or endeavors that they're going to embark upon. Even if you don't have a tremendous network, there's at least one person out there who can help you. And you'd be surprised at how willing people are to help. I think that was one of my hesitations going into Scalis is like, sure, like knew all this stuff of electric and the agency side of things, but like how willing would people be able to help out on this side of things? And it's almost uncomfortable asking for help or asking for referrals or asking for intros, whatever it may be. But that's actually what people want to do. They want to be able to help the entire community sort of thrive and succeed. And things like building out the initial MVP, whenever we started that, like 18 months ago, I remember sitting down with a couple of founders, one being the founder of Gatsby and then the founder of EcoCart, and talking to them about what their process was like, starting and raising their seed round and then building their first product, and a couple of others. And every single one told me to watch out for tech debt and to make sure that you're building it on an infrastructure that will be scalable. So that way you don't end up in a place where you have customers that are paying for a product, but yet you have to somehow migrate them over to a completely new system, and you spend 6 months just refactoring the whole thing because you can't scale off of the crappy solution that was built from day one. And fortunately, we've been able to avoid that, but we were only able to avoid that or we could have lucked our way into it, but we were able to avoid that because we asked, because we reached out, because we solicited that feedback and advice from people who have done it before.
Yeah, I think the culture among entrepreneurs and founders and whatnot is a little different than a lot of other industries or professions, whether it's like finance or things like that. I think there's a much greater willingness to help others, and to reach out and to really help expand people's networks. And I think there's a very much a collaborative spirit that seems to exist amongst many of the people we've spoken to, particularly if they're not in your industry and whatnot, or in your, if there's no conflict there. I mean, everyone seems to want everyone else to succeed. I think everyone's excited to be along for different rides and different journeys, and see how things go from there. So it's definitely been a good experience. And I think it just shows how, at the end of the day, people are really willing to help others if you tap into your network and reach out.
I think as entrepreneurs, it's like respect is given both ways. And so I know one of the things that I think about before reaching out to somebody or before asking them to get on a call is like, do I actually have my own stuff together? Like, am I just getting on a call for the sake of getting on a call? Am I going to be wasting their time? Because like, I realize how busy I am. And the last thing I would want to do is for somebody to solicit me and my advice, but then to waste my time. And so every time I go into one of these calls or whatever it may be, I am trying to be hyper focused on essentially, am I wasting this person's time? Like, I don't want to waste this person's time because I can only imagine how busy they are, especially if it's like somebody who has a 500 person company versus like a 50 person company like Electric. I can only imagine what your calendar and schedule looks like. So it's like also revering that and giving it the respect it deserves, I think pays itself off.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. I mean, it's been fun to talk to all the people we've spoken with, and to see, how their own experiences relate to our product, and to learn about ways in which they think they might be able to use it or other people they know might be able to use it. I think the reception has been really strong, and I mean, that's really exciting from our perspective for sure, because so many of these guys are so integral to the hiring process of their own companies, especially, as founders, and whether or not they're still doing the hiring, because obviously some of them have bigger businesses, but they've all at least had to do it at some point. And so they've been invaluable.
And that's usually the number one pain point I hear from entrepreneurs is like hiring was the biggest issue to get my company to where it is today. And especially on the agency side, which is a services business. I mean, if we couldn't hire, we literally could not grow. Like, more people meant more growth and vice versa. So if you turn off that funnel, you're screwed.
Yeah. I mean, hiring is becoming a huge issue right now. I mean, there's been labor shortage in certain industries. And so this is definitely an interesting time to be entering the market. And, I mean, there's never been more competition for certain roles and certain employees than right now, particularly in certain specific niche industries and whatnot. So there's all kinds of exciting developments going on.
Yeah, I mean, albeit in my limited time of being in the professional workplace, there's so many people looking for a job, and there's so many people hiring. But there's like this gap, it feels like, especially after the recent layoffs, where they're just not getting matched up. But I hear from a bunch of companies like, we're hiring like crazy, we can't find anybody. And then I know a bunch of like relatively qualified people in my network that are looking, but they can't find the jobs. And so whether it's, I think a lot of it has to do with like talent gap as well. Or not even talent per se, it's more so they're not specialized or in the fields that these companies are hiring for.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the roles that I look at on company pages right now are highly, highly technical, at least from the ones that I've glanced at. And I feel like there's a gap in the market for those with that type of skill set. So maybe there's an avenue in the future where, or maybe AI will just replace everybody, but maybe there's an avenue in the future where there will be some sort of a education system or training system that we can put in place within the Scalis product to be able to help sort of up level people. But also from all my friends I've heard, like, the whole thing about hiring that really bothers me is that there's so much emphasis put on experience. And it's like, for what? Like, I look at some of these roles and it's like, you need 10 plus years of marketing experience. Like, why? Why the hell do you need 10 plus years of marketing experience? Maybe you have, I don't have 10 years of marketing experience. I haven't been in the workforce for 10 years. So like, how the hell are you going to take this arbitrary number and just throw it in there? I mean, yeah, I think it matters in certain industries, or you definitely have to give credibility to that. But at the same time, if you can have somebody who can come in and produce results or is really hungry to learn, like, why would you not take a chance on them? Why are you boxing yourself into an even narrower set of individuals? So I think part of what I'm hoping Scalis will be able to achieve is to sort of democratize the hiring process a little bit, especially in certain industries where it's very like credential oriented, or very like, what have you done in your career?
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes it very difficult to break into new industries or to allow like self-starters to do what they want to do. And that's why I started electrics, because I didn't want to just go be a cog in the wheel of another marketing agency. And so when I went out about hiring, I didn't really care if you had any experience. It was more about whether or not you were willing to learn. And sure, you can't do that in all industries. Like, I don't want the person who looked up how to do email marketing on YouTube to be building rockets and airplanes. But the vast majority of industries, you don't need a professional education for it. Yeah. So I think there's too much given to that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here to look at ways of, if you're a job seeker applying for certain jobs, right? Maybe you're looking for a certain role, and there's definitely going to be patterns there, because some people spray and pray, but often, there's an industry or a specific niche you're looking for. And, with our system and the way we're sort of tracking the data and really getting to learn about the job seekers and the jobs, hopefully and I think we see a path, in the future in which, we can not only help the employers find the right job seekers, but help job seekers, right, figure out like, what skills are you missing? Essentially, like, you've applied to all these jobs, like, what would make you more competitive for these jobs? Like, what component are you missing of your application to sort of get there? So insights that they might not be able to derive themselves, but which, an algorithm like the ones we're working on actually can derive.
I think that feedback loop is so important. That's why having the job board and the ATS together make that possible. So it's how, like, on Uber, you're like, oh, this driver, not good. Why? I don't know. You smelled. Or, oh, this passenger was terrible. Like, they, I don't know, did God knows what in the backseat of my car. But that feedback loop is important to feed into the algorithm to then match people later on, which is something that's completely missing from the market today. And I think our ability to just go have one company, get them on the applicant tracking system, and then you have hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants going through, and then they get their job seeker profile, that's going to make our lives so much easier. This user acquisition, especially in this post-iOS world, is extraordinarily expensive and a nightmare. So for us to be able to just plug into existing companies, and that's how we get all of the users, I think that is everything else about the product, I think, is awesome. But that's like what is going to allow us to scale and grow. Because the sales and marketing is so crucial. If your product is really awesome, but nobody sees it, never sees the light of day, then it doesn't matter. Yeah.
For us, the data is going to be critical, and the volume of data. So, the quality and the volume are going to be the two biggest things. And how can we achieve that more quickly, essentially, than any other platform that's going to be sort of the make or break of how we can actually, make these algorithms work. But I do think that just coming out the gate, we have so many offerings for SMBs that just don't exist in the marketplace right now for them, or which they've been completely priced out of, that this won't be too heavy of a lift, because I really do think that on the ATS side, this is really a value play for them. And I think they, just based on the interviews we've done, they already recognize that. And there's so many people who are just eager to hop on a platform that actually allows them to even engage in the hiring process in a meaningful way, as opposed to just, posting a job on LinkedIn and getting, 1,000 candidates that you can barely sort through, and then trying to transfer their resumes over to Asana so you can kind of like work them through some sort of makeshift pipeline you've come up with because it's, cheaper than paying some ATS, $250 a month for one to post 2 or 3 jobs and have 1 or 2 HR associates on it.
Yeah. I mean, the market is just totally screwy because as a job seeker, you are also incentivized to just spray and pray because everybody else is. And that's also what the job boards are promoting. Like, we're going to basically just give you a funnel of all these applicants. And so we have to reshift that paradigm a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that mentality, there's just, there's quality candidates who are slipping through the cracks, and it's just not ideal.
Well, I think the most interesting thing, or not the most, but one of the most interesting things we heard is that I want the candidates who aren't applying to my job. Because this person had taken the mindset that anybody who's actually really qualified, they don't waste their time applying to jobs. They just reach out to their network and they're going to get placed into some position because they realize that the job market is a complete and utter shit show. And so they're like, you know what, screw it. We're just going to go with the network, or I'm not going to waste my time filling out hundreds and hundreds of applications if they're going nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true to a certain extent. I think there's a lot of people who do just reach out to their network to hire, but oftentimes those people are still having them apply to the jobs. I know that particular individual would still have them apply to their ATS so that they could get their resume into their backlog. So even if they didn't end up choosing them for the job, if they chose someone else, they would still have them in their system to review. But I do think there's also a lot of qualified people who still search for jobs because everyone has sort of dream or aspirational jobs that they want to take a crack at.
Yeah.
I know you had a number of people leave electric for, kind of niche industries that they had wanted to really try out that weren't marketing or were marketing oriented, but they wanted a specific industry. Like some people left for the music industry. Yeah. So I do.
Music, totally separate job, right. Fashion, like just which makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to have electric be like a launch pad for their careers. But things that I would never even have thought of. Yeah. Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think there's both of those. There's both the search component and from the job seeker standpoint and from the employer standpoint. And I think our platform does a good job of facilitating both of those in a way that no other platform has really been able to yet.
So last question before we wrap things up here. 5 years down the line, what's your ideal state for Scalis and the industry as a whole?
Yeah. 5 years down the line, I think our goal is to see a centralization of these tools. A platform where everything is housed in one sort of central database where everything can be accessed and utilized under one hub, so that we can take advantage of all those exciting synergies that come with having all these different data points and resources kind of funneling into one place. And I don't think that means, that this is an industry where I think all these businesses can coexist. I mean, Indeed and ZipRecruiter and LinkedIn all exist together. They're all still used. And so I don't think it's a winner take all situation by any means. And obviously we'll still be a smaller company by then, I'm sure. And so we don't really see ourselves as kind of supplanting or taking over this market by ourselves. But I think, seeing our company as sort of a new and exciting and central component of the hiring process, and another resource that can be tapped beyond just sort of the traditional job board is sort of where we're going.
Yeah, I'm just super excited to just start learning, start testing, have the users on the product, get to dive really deep into their pain points and problems, and just roll up our sleeves and see what we can make happen over here. Well, thank you for joining us. Not that you had a choice, but where can folks who are listening find you online?
Me?
LinkedIn?
Yeah, I can be found on LinkedIn. That's about it.
LinkedIn. Yeah, you're a little bit of a ghost when it comes to the social media presence.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, or anybody who's listening who's interested in potentially leveraging an applicant tracking system, scalis.ai is the website, scalis.ai. If it wasn't obvious, there's a lot of AI in the product, so that's interesting. That's one area that I've been learning a lot about. My initial sort of conceptions about what AI is have been altered significantly while building with it. So that's been fun. But as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electricmarketing.com. And again, thanks to our sponsor, Gorgias, for hosting this episode. And we will see you next time.